Oh hi! Pokémon has become unavoidable in these last couple of years. I mean, for example, I have 8 Charmanders living in this flat with me, and that's only the tip of how many Charmanders we have. And I mean, I've talked about the first generation of Pokémon so many times. Okay, twice. But I can't keep talking about it, because talking about the same thing again and again is the first sign of insanity. Or is that talking to yourself? So I need to spice it up a bit, and I know exactly what to do. I'm going to talk about the second generation of Pokémon. Why didn't I think of this sooner?
I always liked Gen 2 as a kid. I remember an emulator on my shitty Android, and then I would look at just the full colour and listen to the music. It felt new despite being 15 years or so old at the time. And I loved it. It felt different to any other Pokémon game I'd emulate.
But now, I hate it.
Okay, so hate might just be a strong word. I more just acknowledge its existence. I mean, I have played the mainline games, but to be honest, I think this generation is just sort of But why?
Well, for one, it's kind of just really underwhelming. I mean, the first generation of Pokemon had 1 million games in it, but this one only has 5, I think. So that's already something not in its favour. And the main games themselves are kind of just a bit meh. But maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this generation is actually quality over quantity. Who knows? I do. I don't think it's very good.
After the success of Red and Blue, these games had to be good, and yeah, they are good. I mean, come on, it was never going to be bad, let's be real, it's the sequels to Pokémon. And this game added loads of great things to the formula, such as, but not limited to, Pokémon gender, breeding, shiny Pokémon, the special stats split, the day-night cycle, weather effects in battle, trainer rematches, and so much more. All of these are great additions to the Pokémon series, and it shouldn't be overlooked by us. Johto as a region does feel like a breath of fresh air compared to Kanto. You know, that's crazy, because it's still very similar to me. I still get that new game feel you get when you're playing a game for the first time. I mean, look at the starting town, for example, New Bark Town, with the slogan of Winds of a New Beginning. It really does cement the idea of a new experience and just being new. And perhaps being new is just what this game does best.
I've mentioned before that I'm not really a big into Kanto. It might just be because they've shoved it down our throats a lot, but it's not the best region there ever has been. But Johto really feels like a breath of fresh air compared to Kanto. I mean, that is what this whole, identity of this game is about. It's the new Pokemon, it's got new Pokemon, it's got a new region, it's got new gym leaders. It's new! And that's really what this game does best. It's really good at being new.
Well, for one, the starters are mostly great, and they are pretty good successors to the iconic original first starters. First, we have Totodile. He's great on his own, but his evolutions in turn are oh so great. Feraligatr is possibly my favourite water starter ever. Cyndaquil is oh so great. He's really cute, and especially in that anime. And Typhlosion is badass as fuck. Although in the 3D games he does kind of lose his badassness just a little bit. He's still a great fire starter.
Don't worry, he's still my favourite. Okay.
And then we get on to Chikorita. Design-wise, yeah, okay starter. I do like it. I do like it a lot, in fact. And fun fact, Chikorita is the only starter from the original version of this game to remain in the final version of the game. But beside that, probably the worst starter here. I mean, yeah, I like the design, but it is quite a boring evolution line. And I mean, the use in the game's atrocious. I mean, the first gym is a flying type gym, for fuck's sake. And Chikorita kind of suffers the same fate that Charmander faced in Gen 1, but instead of becoming a cool as fuck dragon that was, and still kind of is to this day, a face of the company, Chikorita just kind of gets a flower around its neck. And it doesn't make picking Chikorita worthwhile like it does picking Charmander. I've never played through Johto with Chikorita as my starter, and I don't think I ever will, because why would I ever inflict that upon myself?
And how does the game play? Like any other Pokemon game, how else was it gonna play?
As I've discussed, this game really is just a really good expansion from Gen 1. Very similar mechanics to that game. And I mean, if it's not broke, don't fix it, as they say. And I mean, how could they expand on it, really? I mean, down to the core, Pokemon is still the same today as it was in Gen 2. And I mean, it plays well, and I don't think anyone would disagree with me over that. Simply put, it plays well.
But it's not perfect. This game is not without its flaws.
For one, the story is just really mid, to be honest, especially in the original games. I mean, most people aren't playing Pokemon for its groundbreaking stories, but the stories in Pokemon are still usually really good and enjoyable. But I struggle to enjoy the Johto game stories. I mean, for one, a lot of it is just going gym to gym, and yes, okay, that's almost every Pokemon game, with some stuff in between. But those are actually entertaining. I mean, this game, Team Rocket's here again, but they're so forgettable. There's no standout characters. They're a very faceless group. They kind of just show up and then disappear again by the end of the game. They've really lost that edge that they had in the original game. I personally think that Gen 2 has the weakest story out of any Pokemon game.
And to be honest, I think it's kind of excusable. I mean, look, the first generation story also wasn't golden. It was kind of just, oh, there's some evil guys, let's take them down, let's go and do the gyms. Which is kind of what this story is as well, just slightly worse. Maybe I am looking at this story from like a modern days perspective, you know, going from like Gen 9 to Gen 2 is a bit of a leap in difference. So maybe if I try and look at it from someone who's literally playing in 1999, I might actually think, oh yeah, that's pretty good. But even then, I doubt it, because it really is just a worse version of Gen 1's story.
However, the Pokemon this time round are a really good evolution of what came before. I feel like they're really different, but I also feel like they can fit into some of the same areas as Gen 1 Pokemon. I mean, come on, it's just more Pokemon. They're all great. I've looked at all of these Pokemon, and I'd go on the record to say that none of these Pokemon are bad. It's a really great addition to the decks, and I think that should be celebrated. My personal favourite this time around has to be Crobat. I mean, he's so cool looking, and he's a really big improvement on the Zubat line. It of course goes without saying, but the music is again great. It's a Pokemon game. I don't think a soundtrack has ever been bad before. I mean, here are some of my favourites.
The rival this time around is called I mean Silver, and he's handled okay. I like him, he's a good rival. He's not the best we're ever going to have or we've ever had, but he's okay. He's handled much better in the remakes, but that's a story for another day. I do like some of the details, like his last team having a Crobat instead of a Golbat, because his whole story is about learning to accept his Pokemon as friends and not as tools. So seeing a Pokemon, you know, evolve from friend evolution is a really nice detail that I'm glad they added. But he's still kind of just jerk-ass rival that like learns the error of his ways. Although I'd go on record to say that he's actually a step up from Blue. Don't shoot me though. And how can I forget? They added Kanto into the post games.
Yeah, how could I not talk about this? They let you go all the way back to Kanto. And yeah, I said I'm sick of Kanto, but in fairness, this is set 2 years later, and things have changed over time in Kanto. And I think it's really fun to go around the region that we were in last time, but see it again with all of these changes. We never really got to do it again, except in Gen 5 where we got to go through Unova 2 years in the future, but it's not the same as going after finishing a mainline game. It really did make Gold and Silver and Red and Blue feel really connected, in a way that I don't think we've ever seen since. And that is not the only way that the games are connected. That's right, Gen 1 and 2 can actually connect together, and you can battle and trade between generations. That is something that can never be done again, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, these days you can transfer one Pokemon from one set of games to another, but you could actually interact with 2 different generations of Pokemon at once back then, and that is so fucking cool, and they've never done it again. You could battle, you could trade, you can't do that anymore, and that's such a shame because it's such a cool idea.
The day-night cycle is also really cool. I find that playing at night gives me this really cozy feeling that I don't get anywhere else in Pokemon. And all of these time-based events make the world seem like they've been lived in, like the bug-catching contest or the Clefairies in Pewter City, and I don't think we ever get something like that again in Pokemon. The worlds don't feel as lived in as they do in these games. But what really sucks about these games? Well, for one, the level curve stinks. There's barely any XP to go around for 6 Pokemon, meaning you'd probably be better holding on to like 4 Pokemon for the majority of the main game. And I mean, I for one just ended up training my Typhlosion to high levels and just destroy the entire game with him during my first playthrough. And I mean, you could just do that for every game in Pokemon, but I think these games make it almost compulsory if you're not careful with your XP distribution. And it's not very well designed in that aspect. And like its predecessor, this game is no stranger to glitches and stuff like that. Although, unlike with Gen 1, you don't have to go out of your way to find the glitches. Most of the time, unlike in Gen 1, where you'd take a step in the game and you'd get like 50 glitches, in this game, you mostly have to set out to glitch the game. That doesn't mean that there aren't any that you could run into during regular gameplay, but it's nothing too bad. One that instantly comes to mind is the Moon Ball that helps catch Pokemon that evolve using a burn heal.
Do you know, maybe I was wrong about Gen 2. These games are flawed, but they are still fun, and I think I forgot that, to be honest. I mean, it's an easy thing to forget when you're like looking at like the level curve and you're just like, oh, I can't be arsed. But they're good games. Like, the soundtrack's good, the gameplay's good, the Pokemon are good. Story leaves a bit to be desired, but it's still okay. It's Pokemon story. You're not coming to like see Breaking Bad. I mean, of course, there are remakes, and I will talk about those another day, but for what it's worth, the second generation of Pokemon did what it set out to do. It gave players a new experience, and it gave us Pokemon for the rest of time. We're never going to escape it.
This game is the definitive Gen 2 game. It expands on the story, it lets you play as a girl, there's more characters, there's more music, it lets you play as a girl, and did I mention it lets you play as a girl? Crystal is also just cooler, to be honest. The cartridge is cooler, it's sparkly, and I won't cover this game as much because it really is just Gold and Silver but better. The game looks better, it improves on poor aspects from Gold and Silver, even if the level curve is still shit. But the Japanese version is way better than the West version, and that is mostly because of the cell phone compatibilities. Admittedly, I know little about this, but I do know that you could trade across the country with other players for 10 yen a go, and I think that's really cool from something from 2000. The feature could also connect to Pokemon Stadium too, and there was battles that were held in official tournaments across the country, and with this you're actually able to watch the tournaments in Stadium 2. And even cooler, you could battle against them in Pokemon Stadium 2, which is something we'd see again in Black and White too, with the Pokemon World Tournament downloads thing, but those were very limited, and I just think this is a really cool thing that you could actually do in 2000. Sadly, it never surfaced in the West, as the adapter needed for this was never released over here. The phone also added events to the games that we didn't get over here until the 3DS port. Most notably, the Celebi event, a cool Japanese exclusive event that would allow you to obtain a GS Ball to catch a legitimate Celebi in-game. the first of its kind for a mythical Pokemon. Overall, Crystal is just better, and if you're gonna play Gen 2, just play Crystal. Just so you can play as a girl instead of a smelly boy.
Okay, so maybe I should talk about the side games now. I mean, they're Freeze! What? Oh, for fuck's sake. We're kidnapping you. Why? What did I do?
We need a good cliffhanger.
Cliffhanger? Come on, let's go. What? Let's go.